Welcome back to another episode of In the Kitchen. So today we're back in the kitchen with the head chefs over at Funnel Chef. So we've got Mr. Scott Concannon, Mr. Mikey Tiber, and myself. And if you haven't met us already, well, over at funnelchef.io, we work with primarily coaches, consultants, and agency owners to implement proven recipes for success into their business so they can just in turn attract more clients, generate more revenue and profits, all while avoiding guesswork, right? So this is taking proven systems and processes that have worked not only in our business, but for our clients and even our competitors throughout the years. And what we've done is we've boiled them down to simple but specific, detail oriented recipes that you can implement into your business. So, you don't have to be a tech guru, a smooth talking salesperson, or just a genius in general to have success. Just like a good recipe, as long as you have the right ingredients and you follow the process step by step, you can also get great results. So, if anyone's watching this and they see my awesome hat on right now, at the time we're recording this, it's just the end of, or basically right at the end of the first week of the NFL, and the Falcons won, even though we didn't really throw the football, still won. So all good. But something we're going to talk about, and this directly, I think, to me at least, relates to the Atlanta Falcons, is about how to grow your team, when you should do that, what pieces you need to add, and then also how to do it to aim for sustainable success, right? So just like a great NFL team, you got to have there's different moving parts, got special teams, offense, defense, but you need to make sure you're evenly dispersed in terms of talent. And then also make sure that you do have leaders in each section as well to help hold the team accountable, move things forward, right? So you can look at your captains like management, right? But so, I think a big question that, I think a lot of people maybe forget to ask, or maybe they just try to jump the gun a little bit too soon, is actually looking at when you should try to start growing your team. I know there's a lot of, everyone wants to, when you first get started, to just add on pieces because, obviously you have to do that to scale, to grow your business to whatever point you're trying to get to. But, that's not always what you need to do day one. Right. I know we've talked about this a lot, especially with sales, right? Of like, when do you need to hire a salesperson? If you only have, 5 leads coming in per week, and you really don't even have like any sort of outbound sales process in place, hiring a salesperson may not be, the best route to take, at least not for the salesperson as well. You don't want to bring someone on and train them, and then your team's doesn't really need them, and then they end up just jumping ship, and then you have to rehire and retrain again. But if we want to look at some other pieces outside of sales, whether it's marketing, operations, things along that line, there's, I think, a similar process, or at least a similar thought process that needs to go in place. Not the exact same, because we're not maybe talking about leads coming in for a salesperson, but, being able to analyze the situation and understand when it's time to add pieces to the team. And I know, Scott, you've, I think, dealt with this a lot more than we have, especially we've primarily been on the sales and marketing end, but looking at things in operations, that's more of your specialty. And so just kind of give us your thoughts, like when, or I guess what things should an entrepreneur or business owner look at so they can try to gauge when is the right time to grow their team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is you see a lot of, if you go through coaching courses and various like coaches, consultants, or the gurus online, I mean, their initial thing is like grow your team immediately, get someone in place, get something riled up. So that way, you're doing the 3-hour work week or whatever, and immediately doing 6 figures and working all but like 3 days a week, which is not the case. And so what I usually look at is when you're financially ready. And typically what that looks like is, if, let's say, you're just a brand new entrepreneur, committing to your sales process that you're setting up yourself, committing to your marketing process, committing to all, like even your fulfillment. So that way, and can expect what it is that each section of your business will actually truly, like, the expectation set, what the workflows look like, what the systems are, what the processes are. And when you start handing off responsibilities, I mean, you're going to be looking at making sure you're financially ready for it. I think that's a big one where what's the first one a lot of entrepreneurs hand off is VAs, getting a VA to do some type of outbound, with the expectation that if I spend X amount of dollars per month. By the end of the month, I'm at scale, which is definitely not the case. So even just speaking of like the first step is knowing your finances. If you can't, spend the money without it like crushing your soul, then don't do it. Like if you expect to spend $1,000 in ad spend, don't do it unless you have $1,000 that you can risk to lose and not feel it financially. So I think that's always the first step of when's a good time financially that you can start offloading responsibility is when you can actually afford it without it like crushing your soul and your business and your spouse punching you in the face. Along with that, it's definitely going into if you're starting to hit those plateaus of where each segment of your business, whether or not that's the marketing, that's the sales, or that's the fulfillment, one of those sections starts eating up the vast majority of your time, but is a repetitive task, then that's usually the first place where you need to look at fulfilling some type of team member, whether or not that is organic outbound, running paid media, as we've talked about previously, having a sales force in place, but then be able to offload that repetitive system or operation off to someone that you can basically train and put in place because you yourself have been doing it. So you know the ins and outs of it, you know what it looks like. And when you bring someone on, you can efficiently get them in place. So that way it's not like, well, thanks for joining the team. Now I really don't know what you should do, but you handle sales. Like that's just the recipe for disaster. I know with Mikey, if you bring him on, it's like the first 30, 60, 90 days is just asking a bunch of questions while he's drinking that bourbon moonshine or whatever it is at 10 a.m. Central Time in the corner of his screen. But in reality, it's getting the details out from some individual that if you haven't thought about it before, you're going to have to get very granular to make sure that your new team member is fulfilling the expectations and the role that you want to hire for.
Yeah. And so you mentioned, about being financially ready, like looking at that as one of the determining factors. But whenever you mentioned, looking at your schedule, looking at time, that's something that I think is really big that I think that's usually what most people probably look at once they get to that point. If let's say if you're a solopreneur, you're working with the clients, you're handling deliverables, you're handling your marketing, which, could be paid. It could just be all organic postings online, messaging people. And then you're also doing sales. So you're wearing 3 hats. And if you look at one day, most people, everyone wants an 8-hour workday. I think some people want shorter. Some people are fine with longer, but you really have to look at your own limitations. Like how many hours in a day do you have that you can actually put towards the business? And once you get to that point of where you're having to pass things over, and the next thing you know, you're a week behind on doing something you needed to do, you're 2 weeks behind. At that point, is it causing you to lose money to where then does it make sense? Like I should have someone else take care of this piece of the business so I can focus on this. And that's always what we mention when we talk about when it's time for someone to expand their sales team, right? Once you get to the point of where it's a hassle for you to make time in your calendar to take sales calls because you have to work with clients, you have to project manage maybe your marketing. So I think time's always a good determining factor. And obviously the financial, like you mentioned, that's pretty important too. You don't want to jump too far ahead, expand your team, and then, be in a financial crisis because of it. Just like when you're trying to expand, I think anything, right? Like your home, right? You don't need to add on that second bedroom, third bedroom, whatever it is to your house if you have no need for it, right? Sometimes it's just cosmetic. It just looks nice to have a big team, but you have to think about it from terms of like functionality as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like you said, it's functionality, but knowing when it's the time, and that's usually the biggest offset. But the other thing to go with that is just to be uber clear. You also have to look at opportunity cost. Like, are you losing money because you couldn't take the number of sheer sales calls, or you couldn't service your leads? I mean, we've talked to a lot of people that are like, well, I got 8,000 leads in my hopper. Okay, who's following up with them? Nobody. So what's the easiest thing we can do with the sales rep if we bring them in immediately is just have them go back through all their leads and try to, re-nurture them to get them interested again, which is tough. But at the same time, it's where is that fine line of when it's a good time to make that expense? because it is an expense. But however, if within 30, 60, 90 days, you're recouping that cost as well as establishing that process, you should alleviate those plateaus or eliminate the opportunity cost lost. And I think that's where the mindset, even around bringing on a team, is something a lot of people don't talk about. Um, Most people believe, at least from my experience, you could always follow me on this one, is if I hire or if I bring someone new on or I start a new process, then I should be profitable that week or I should start seeing results almost immediately. But where, and if we're doing big box retail with a lot of experience I have, you're training someone and you don't really expect profitability or efficiency from that person for 90 days. Now, they could be great go-getter. That's great. And you could start seeing some good stuff, but they're not comfortable. They don't understand everything. They don't know the terminology, and they're just getting their feet wet for the first 30, 60, 90 days to get into those routines. And so that's where kind of the expenses I mentioned earlier kind of come into play. Like if they don't drive a profit for you in the first 30, 60, 90 days, you got to be okay with that. And then also it gives you an opportunity to make sure that for your first hires, you got the right systems in place to train them. So again, it's like the weight between opportunity costs and being able to budget them in, knowing that you're not making an ROI off them in 5 days.
Yeah, I think, if we want to jump back into NFL football metaphors, right? So, sometimes when you go out and draft that rookie in the first round, you can't expect that to be, maybe it's a quarterback, right? But you can't always expect, even with a quarterback, for them to come in and just turn your franchise around, right? To be the guy right out the gate. They need to learn your system, work with the other members on your team, and work towards things that way. So I think that is, especially from a sales perspective, a lot of business owners, they're like, man, I just need to hire a closer. I just need a salesperson on the team. But kind of like you mentioned, right? If you have 8,000, like if you have a ton of leads that are just getting stale in the database, that's an opportunity cost right there. You're losing money. And, sometimes, I think you'd be surprised at how many people, especially, I would say primarily coaches and consultants, definitely. I think some other bigger companies already have this stuff taken care of, but how many coaches and consultants, they take someone through their sales process. And sometimes it's not even like an actual sales process. It's just, they just try to get someone to hop on the phone with them. But what happens when that lead doesn't close? I think in the coaching kind of consulting world, people want like a 1 or 2 call close. But what happens if that person doesn't close? I mean, what else do you have in place to communicate with them? And if you don't have those things in place, you're losing money as well. And it could be as simple as, last week I was writing up copy for email campaigns and 2 different campaigns. And it's something that takes a little bit of time to sit down and do it, right? You could outsource that work. You could do it yourself, whatever it is. But once you have that, you put it in place, it can be automated. And that hits one aspect of your business. And, sometimes if you don't have things like that in place to keep the leads warm, if it's part of your sales process, sometimes just bringing on a salesperson, that's not going to be, that could be a band-aid. Maybe you close a couple more deals a month just because you have someone who's just specifically dedicated towards that, but that's maybe not fixing the overall problem. And I think that could maybe in some aspect be said for like any part of the business, right? You can do some quick fixes, and you can hire someone and maybe they do help. But if you don't have the right tools, the right training, the right materials, the right assets in place, it may not be sustainable. So for example, if you want to hire a salesperson, you need to have the right training available for them, right? You need to have whether scripts they need access to. If they're booking meetings on your calendar, they need to have easy access to those calendars. So you just want to make things easy. That doesn't mean do their job for them, but why make it harder, right? And I know, Mikey, like you've definitely hired and trained a lot of salespeople. So, I mean, do you want to touch on this a little bit more? I know we speak about it a lot, but talking about how to grow or when to grow a sales team and how to put them in a position to have, success.
I mean, I think it depends on the complexity of the offer, and the quality of the salesperson that you're trying to attract is going to determine kind of what you need ahead of time. I will say that if you don't have some level of a working sales process and funnel in place, then you shouldn't be hiring a salesperson, full stop. like you said, having email retargeting, SMS retargeting, getting back in front of clients that don't show up or, or got busy and haven't closed, that's 60 to 75% of your business, that you're throwing in the trash when you don't have the systems in place. So I personally don't believe in the field of dreams. I don't think if you build it, they will come. I think true entrepreneurs go and, you know, sell it and then build it. So they go prove concept. And the only way to really prove concept is by market testing, where someone has to exchange value, money being that value. Um, but yeah, depending on the complexity offer, assuming you have some level of a sales process that works, some level of a presentation that works, a really good sales professional, sales leader, you can just turn over the recordings and they'll transcribe it and basically do what you were doing until they improve it. I know that's one of the first things that we ask for when we go into a gig, right? That being said, if you don't have anything in place whatsoever, then your starting point should be, ironing out those stages, that process, making sure it works for you as an individual, and then duplicating yourself, replicating yourself. On average, it takes, I think the last statistic I read was, on average, it takes 10 months for a salesperson to become competent in a new role. Let that sink in. 10 months is a long time. So that means you're duplicating yourself, once a year at best. So start with the one, make sure it works, and then go out. But as we discussed before, I always believe you should hire a setter before you try and hire a closer. Unless you just have an unbelievable offer, it's absolutely proven, it's high ticket, and you have the money to put behind the marketing, then you can bring in, an external team that'll figure out all the kinks for you, like us.
Yeah. And I think most people would, or at least I've heard this said a lot, right? When it comes to like investing in your marketing, right? You're investing in your business. If you want to look at it from a personal perspective, right? Most people, they're not going to start investing, financially, whether it's in the stock market, real estate, whatever it is, until you have your bills figured out first, right? Is your monthly expenses, is that taken care of? And then you can start investing, in other things. I think if you want to look at your marketing that way as well, I think marketing is key, especially if you're really trying to generate sales. Like, you need to have something to draw that interest in. But let's say, if, for example, if someone starts running paid ads, it doesn't need to be a thing of where, okay, we're going to start running ads this month, we need to close X amount of deals, or we have to cut it off immediately, right? That's not enough time, to really like dial something in and even know if it's going to work. So I think, if you want to grow your sales or your business in general, I think investing in your marketing's smart, but knowing when to do that, right? You need to make sure you have the budget for that. And then also looking at it from the long-term plan, right? Not looking at, okay, I'm going to start running these ads. If X amount of deals don't close in 30 days, we're done. We got to cut it off. It's a failed project. You need to have consistent marketing running. Because again, like, Mikey just mentioned, 60, 70, 75% of your business, it may not just be that one call close, the first conversation you have with someone. You need to have content in front of them. This isn't saying that people need to 100% like you and you're just selling just based off relationships. But, whether it's a problem that you're addressing, whatever that is, you need to be seen as an expert in it. And this doesn't mean you need to be like the expert, but people need to, have some sort of confidence in your like level of expertise, right? And I think that a lot of that does come with marketing, right? You could have the best solution in the world, but if no one ever hears about you or your name or your solution, it really doesn't matter, right? Someone else could just come and copy it and then market it. And then that's what they're known for. And I know we've worked with different clients in the past and we've told them the same thing, right? They have a really good idea, but they're just not marketing it, or at least they're not marketing it the way that's going to be aimed at like consistent success. And, if you're not associating yourself with that, someone else could just do it. And then, that's what they're known for. So, you know, it's something worth thinking about. I think marketing is really important, especially for any sort of opportunity where we're coming on a sell on someone's offer. There needs to be some sort of leads there. It could just be a list, that some sales team's calling, right? Or it could be inbound leads coming in. But, and a lot of that is going to come from some form of marketing, whether it was yesterday or today or marketing that's going on tomorrow. Again, it's an investment in your business. So if you want your sales team to close deals, should at least give them, a few numbers to call. You could just, if it's B2B, maybe you just give them a phone book. But I would say the phone book's better than nothing, right?
Yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah, that's not the most fun thing to do, but obviously, like every salesperson wants inbound leads because that's great. It's already on your calendar. May not always be the case, but I think in terms of putting some sort of marketing and sales combination, like looking at it as client acquisition, putting that in place for long-term success, there needs to be some sorts of congruency between your marketing and sales, and have a dialed in process and consistency.
Yeah, I would like tag on to that too. Is like if you're talking about like the sustainability of like the entire team, whether or not that's your marketing, sales, or ops, it's like you mentioned, is you got to have everything from the front end to the back end, hopefully set up as you continue to expand. So that'd be everything from what happens when a lead enters a funnel to long-term follow-up and lead nurture. What happens to if your marketing campaigns, what are you trying? What are you testing? A/B splits? Are you doing organic? Are you doing paid? All of it goes into like that sustainability, like what you mentioned, is if you're just going for the one call closes, you're not going to be terribly sustainable unless you're just, burning through cash in terms of trying to get that cost per acquisition as low as possible. But if you're trying to create something sustainable, you want like all those facets lined up. And then as you expand your team, you basically, as Mikey mentioned earlier, full stop. You don't want a sales rep brought on if you don't even have like marketing funnels set up. So, having those pieces in play before you begin the hire, or it's a specific hire to help you put those pieces in play, you have to keep that in mind when you're talking about sustainability, whether or not that's ongoing email follow-up, it's, having enough reps to be able to do that 30-day follow-up on, like, let's say a phone or text. But if you're just going for a one call close or two call close, and that's the kind of the one and done method, the long-term sustainability is going to diminish over time because you're just going to churn and burn through your leads. Like a good example, like not necessarily in this market, but spoke with a client last week about, hey, you got 20x or 20, like 3,000 people in your leads that have purchased from you in the past. Whether or not that's a $10 item or a $500 item. So like, let's set up marketing campaigns to retarget those who already know your brand, know your business, and you can get back in front of them with promos or whatever you need to. And the first thought was, no, I don't want to retarget my old leads. I just want to get brand new ones. Okay, well, if you're wanting to drive business as quick as possible and get the highest ROI per client, what do you think we should be doing? We should go after the people that already know who you are, so the cost per acquisition is much lower. And then that becomes part of your sales process, is you sell one thing to them, wait a couple of weeks, come back to them. And then if that works out, then sustainability is just driving more traffic right back to where you need them to go. And then if you need a team member, you can put someone in place who manages the follow-up. And that's a really good ROI generator. So it's knowing where your sustainable money is. And as Mikey says, a lot of the times it's in the people that have opted in or purchased from you in the past.
Yeah, just because you speak to someone, for the first time doesn't mean they're ready to get married, right? You might need to go on a couple more dates than that. But, I do think in terms of salespeople, looking at it from that perspective, someone coming onto the team, at least what I've looked at is you want to ask the question to understand like what their closing percentages look like what's average deal size, what are average sales reps making. And, it's okay maybe if you don't have all that data, but you need to be upfront with the person, letting them know, what it looks like when they're coming into it. But at the same time, so if you're trying to build a team, that's an approach you could take. If you're trying to grow a team, it's a little bit different versus building, right? I know, Mikey, you and I were speaking to someone, and he's like, "Man, it's a lot easier for me to get someone from 1 to 10 versus from like 0 to 1, right?" And I think that's part of how it is in your hiring process as well, right?
You should put some context on that too. This is
I like leaving it in,
a fairly prominent and well-known sales trainer. One of the ones with that helps you get placement and also works with businesses in placing it. So think, not trying to call them out, but think, Cole Gordon or Sales Snipers or Jeremy Miner, somebody of that nature. A model that we've been running for years, but it is 100% easier to get someone from 1 to 10 than it is from 0 to 1. It's like the first $1 million is harder to make than the first 10, right?
Yeah.
That being said, I think that boils down to, in a substantial part, about having realistic expectations of what the role is and doing a better job of qualifying the individuals for the attributes, the personality type, the skill set to be successful in sales. And I'm not talking about being an extrovert, right? The best salespeople in the world are actually introverts. They have to study. They master their craft, and that's why they do so well. As opposed to extroverts that just talk at people a lot of times and rely on their natural talents, but never really get there because they don't master their craft. But I think screening, qualifying is what's necessary, at least in his front. I'm sorry if that went on a little bit of a tangent on your point.
No, I think that adds to the conversation, though, right? I think because mentioning that going from 1 to 10 is a lot of times easier from 0 to 1. I think same if you're looking at your hiring process, right? If you're hiring your first salesperson, you may not have your whole onboarding process as dialed in as you'd want it to be to put them in the best place for success. But one thing that we do is, obviously everyone we work with, they use our software. All the clients we manage is because it's easy to navigate, easy to use. It's basically built for salespeople. But we actually have a link tree, usually just embedded in the menu, and they can get access to whatever scripts they need, access to recordings of calls, access to any calendars they would need to book on. So I think again, we kind of mentioned this briefly, but you want to put anyone you hire them with the expectation of that they are going to have success, right? That it's a good hire. And any way you can make that easier on them, that's just, number one, they might like you a little bit more. It's easier to get ramped up, especially for a salesperson. They're coming in, some people, if you're hiring someone who's familiar with the industry, their ramp up time may be a little bit shorter than someone who's just completely new to the industry, but you still want to make sure you can get them those tools and those assets to make their startup process easier. And again, whether it's, that's just with sales, but even with your marketing, right? If you're hiring an outside agency or you're bringing someone in-house, you're going to get a list of things that they need from you, right? They're probably going to want logos, testimonials, like just whatever assets you have that they can actually use for your marketing. If you don't have any of that stuff in place, I would start working on it, because if you do want to get the ball rolling, and most people, if you hire like an outside agency to run your ads and manage your marketing for you, you want to see some sort of ROI sooner rather than later. Don't make it hard on yourself, right? Go ahead and gather those assets that you need so that you can get that process going. And I think you could kind of look at that from anywhere. I mean, so Scott, like on your side, if you were looking at hiring, adding on team members on the operations side, like what things, what things do you think business owners can do to not only make the onboarding process like smooth for them, but also to just put them in a place to have success?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is knowing why you're hiring them and what pieces they're going to fulfill. Meaning, um, you need to know like what is the job description and the expectations. I think that's a big one. A lot of people do not set forth before like the first or new positions coming in is what is the actual description of the position and how are we going to hold you accountable, but in a good way. Like your employee needs to know, and they're going to want to know too, of like what's going to make sure or what's going to set them up for success or what's the expectation for them within that new role. So when bringing someone and onboarding them, it's one, making sure they 100% know what they're getting into and what it is they're going to be expected to do. And then providing enough resources to get them trained or at least the technical know-how as fast as possible. And that could be, videos, SOPs, documents, training, like live trainings with them in person, Zoom, whatever. And then be able to not only give them the information for them to go out and start doing their job, but then having follow-up conversations with them to just provide them feedback. But again, I think you can't do any of that if you can't even describe exactly what they're going to do on a day-to-day basis and then how you can give them or what kind of expectations they should have for knowing that they're on track to do the job that they're basically hired for the team. So being able to define those are going to be priority number one, and then having the resources for them to be successful on an ongoing basis is going to be priority two. And that's going to help you get someone established, understand the system in the process or what it is you're hiring them for, and get them up to speed as quick as possible. So they know what they're doing, they know how to do it, they know what their expectations are. And then when you are following up with them, you basically provide them feedback on exactly what it is that you talked about day one or within the hiring process.
Yeah. So this is something that I think sometimes might get overlooked. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I think it does. But in terms of looking for sustainability and just ongoing success when you're growing a team, is you also need to think about like what does the culture in your company look like? Like what does that look like? Because I've seen this on Reddit, right, LinkedIn, a lot of the posts where people are asking questions, but and this is more aimed at salespeople, but I think for any aspect of the business, this makes sense as well. Is that were you more likely to stay in a position that pays well but has poor culture and management versus great culture, great management you're working with, but less pay? And I think maybe that's preference, right? Depending on which way you would lean there. But the goal would be to have both of those, right? You want to make sure you can pay your people adequately, right? And that means like what you were describing earlier about making sure you're financially ready to add on to the team. If you want top talent, you're going to have to pay them, right? Yeah, it has to be competitive with what other offers. Um, but also, like you mentioned, when it comes to putting them in a place for success, those check-ins, especially huge in sales, right? In terms of doing call reviews, things like that, especially with new salespeople. But you need to figure out what sort of culture are you going to have in your business, and is it one that people are going to want to be involved in? So that also looks at hiring the right people. Um, you could hire someone who maybe on paper they look like they're the best for the job, but they just do not fit in with your company culture at all. Um, that looks more like a quick fix, like a band-aid. At least that's what it sounds like to me. You can hire a great salesperson, but they don't mesh with anyone else on the team. They don't have the same values. Good chance they might not be there for the long run. And most people they want continued success, especially with if it's their business, right? It's their baby. You want to watch it grow up, go off to college, whatever it is. But you want to make sure that you're doing things to put that in place. And that's talking about sports again, right? If we want to look at like the New England Patriots, right? Being in Atlanta, I hate the Patriots, right? Horrible. But part of them having that huge run, a lot of it was Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, but a lot of it was also the culture that was put in place there, right? It wasn't just Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. They had different receivers coming in, different defensive players, different linemen, running backs, everything there. But there was a culture in place which was aimed at success. And a lot of people talk about mindset, but I think that goes into it. If you come into the right situation, and everyone has that same mindset of aiming for success, even some people who maybe were, I don't want to call them outliers, but maybe on the outside looking in, people do go into that group mentality when it's there, right? You can be peer pressure can be a positive thing, just like a negative thing. So, I think in terms of if you're looking to build a culture that's number one, when you hire someone, you want them to be there for an extended period of time, but then also having that culture of people who want success. So they're not just there to just barely do their job. They want to have success, and they're going to get some sort of positive, reaction from that. And I think part of that also comes into, again, just treating your team right, right? So not only the culture, but good management. No one likes being yelled at or talked down to. So if you really want to keep good people on your team, I wouldn't do that. They may not say anything, but they're probably secretly looking for another job at the same time. So, if you're going to do that, hopefully you're paying them a lot more than they would make somewhere else, or they're not going to stick around forever. Um, but I know that's, naturally, I think I always look at everything from the sales perspective of like, hiring the sales team, what salespeople want. Um, but, I've done it on the opposite side of marketing as well. If you're paying an outside team to manage your marketing for you, it's pretty much all on you at that point, right? If they ask you for, hey, I need these assets from you, and it takes you 2 weeks to get it to them, they may send you some reminders, but at the end of the day, they're not you, right? They can't do certain things for you. Um, so you have to get those things over. But that goes for an internal team as well, right? If you hire someone internally to, whether it's maybe just managing your social media, um, or maybe they're actually producing and editing content for you. If they ask you multiple times, hey, I really need you to shoot these videos for me so I can edit them and then actually post them online for you. And if you never do shoot those videos, then they can't even really do their job. So, I think, you want to make sure you establish a good culture, but management, making sure you can provide them with the tools, things that they need to do their job. That's really important. And, something we kind of spoken about this, but what I think is really important is the onboarding process, that beginning to the relationship, right? You can call that the honeymoon phase, right? If you want, but I think when you first hire someone, getting them set up the right way, that's really important. And then especially with, I know with our CRM that all of our clients use, we makes it super easy because, again, you don't need 6 different logins to work. You can use one login that makes things a lot easier, but also it makes it easy to give people access to what they need. Um, I've been in situations where I've gotten hired to come on to a sales team or on the marketing side, and 2 to 3 weeks into the job, and it's like, man, I still don't have access to this, so I can't do this piece. So if you can consolidate all of that information and have it in one login, makes it super easy. But it's also, again, you want to get that ROI like you were talking about before, Scott. It's not always going to happen like day one, like the first week, but in that 30, 60, 90 day period, you want to make sure that you are doing the things that you can do to help put them in a place for success. Because if you hire someone in 90 days down the line, you have to let them go because it didn't work out. You then have to hire someone else, train them, hope that it works out for them in 90 days. And then if it doesn't work out for them in 90 days, you really have to kind of take a step back and look, am I just hiring the wrong people, or am I not putting them in a place, to have success? Um, I think a lot of people are guilty of it. And this isn't even a negative thing, but sometimes we just assume that other people already know the things that we know, right? Because we're thinking about it from our perspective. But especially for like a solopreneur, if they've been working by themselves, doing everything, you hire someone for your marketing, sales, like client management, whatever it is, you can't just expect that they already know like what you want done, how you talk to clients, how you deal with this issue, how you sell it. So you need to just assume that no one knows anything, right? And then make sure to have good assets, good tools in place for them there. Scott, so what would you say? So looking at it on the side of, let's say that you were growing a team, and let's say we're looking at customer support, right? So client support. Um, what things do you think people would need access to have success, in a shorter time frame, which could just be info on clients, could be access to the right calendars, could be access to scripts, trainings. Like what things do you think, would help put people in the best spot to have success?
Yeah, I think it's being able to have the ability to communicate and communicate the right way. So, like for instance, if you have a CRM in place where you can manage that client communication and track it over time, like for instance, Funnel Chef, you can see the entire conversation history is a great way to be able to just see what everything looks like. But at the same time, you can take notes on your client and you can update as you go. Along with that is, as you mentioned, having the ability to possibly schedule calls or to get on a Zoom call or Google Meet or whatever that may be. So having the proper link set up for some type of support system that a client, if they're in super need, can hop on a call or can do X, Y, Z. And then obviously, I think to make sure that if you have someone in place to handle that system or process for you, is the right training and the right material for instance, like FAQs or a good background knowledge of what it is they're there to answer. I mean, the worst thing you could do is set someone up on a customer service role or fulfillment. Someone asks them a question, they're like, I have no idea. And then it just extends out the length of what someone's needing to get that information handled. So it's definitely having the right links, the right conversation tools, and as you mentioned, having the right information on hand so that person is a knowledgeable rep for your company. So that's FAQs, training material, and back-end information that they can quickly access and have a location where they know they can access it every time.
Yeah, no, I think it would be great for someone coming in working in client support to have a FAQ sheet, right? It happens sometimes, but what you don't want to happen is you bring someone from customer support, and then every single client they speak to, they just cannot help them, right? Then it's like, what are they there for, right? So it's just kind of throwing someone in the line of duty or throwing them in the fire without actually even giving them the right tools to succeed. So, guys, so thanks for joining us. This is for another episode of In the Kitchen. If this is your first time meeting us, well, over at funnelchef.io, we work with coaches, consultants, and agency owners to implement proven recipes for success into their business so they can attract more clients, generate more revenue and profits, all while avoiding that dreaded guesswork. So this is taking proven systems and processes that have worked, not only in our business, but work for our clients and even our competitors throughout the years. And we boil them down to simple but specific, detail-oriented recipes that you can implement into your business today. So you don't have to be, a tech guru, a smooth-talking salesperson, or just a genius in general to have success. Just like a good recipe, as long as you've got the right ingredients and you follow the step-by-step process, you can also get great results. So if you'd like to learn more about, what we do, who we are, and find out if what we do even makes sense for you, you can check us out online at funnelchef.io or on any social media platform.